It all started with a joke, a moment meant to get a cheap laugh. But by the time it ended, no one at Pine Ridge High School would ever look at James the janitor the same way again. Mr. Callahan, the school's longtime calculus teacher, known more for his sharp tongue than his sharp mind, had a habit of tossing sarcasm around like chalk dust. He ruled his classroom with a dry wit and a constant air of superiority. Never quite cruel, but never far from condescending either. Students tolerated him because they had to. Teachers rolled their eyes behind his back. The guy knew math, but connecting with kids, that wasn't his thing. It was a sleepy Thursday afternoon, just after lunch. The kind of day where the air in the classroom felt thick with exhaustion, where backpacks slumped against desks and students blinked slowly at the clock, counting down minutes like they were stuck in some endless loop. The classroom buzzed with low energy, half the students trying to stay awake, the other half pretending to understand the string of derivatives Mr. Callahan was throwing up on the board. Equations filled every corner of the whiteboard like hieroglyphics. The air smelled faintly of old sneakers, pencil shavings, and that weird cleaning solution they used for desks. Phones were hidden just out of sight, thumbs flicking through TikTok in their laps, while Callahan paced at the front like a man on autopilot. Then came the sound, that unmistakable squeak of a mop gliding across linoleum. Everyone recognized it instantly. James, the janitor, always there, always quiet, always working. He moved like clockwork, pushing his mop through the hallways with calm efficiency, like nothing could shake him. Never spoke unless spoken to. Always had earbuds in, but never playing anything loud enough to hear. Some students waved to him, most didn't. He was part of the background, the kind of person you pass 100 times without really seeing. And that's when Callahan saw him outside the classroom door. It happened fast. Too fast to feel anything but second-hand embarrassment. Mr. Callahan stopped mid-sentence, marker hovering in the air like a conductor holding his final note. He glanced at the door, that half-smirk already forming. Then, with a sarcastic bite, he pointed toward the hallway and said, "Hey, James, you think you could solve this one?" His tone said it all. This wasn't an invitation. It was a joke, a dig. The kind of moment designed to make teenagers laugh and remind them who held the dry erase marker and the power. The class chuckled, some louder than others. Not a full roar, but enough to let you know they were in on it. A few kids looked uncomfortable, unsure if they should laugh at all. James didn't smile, didn't frown, didn't even hesitate. He just stopped, turned, and looked into the room with that same unreadable calm he always had. There was a moment, just a second, where it felt like the air shifted. Students started whispering, nudging each other. Is he gonna say something? Is he mad? But James didn't look mad. He just stepped inside, leaving his mop leaning against the wall like it would be waiting for him when he got back. Every eye in the room followed him as he walked slowly to the front, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes flicking up at the equation on the board. He stopped just in front of Mr. Callahan. "You mind if I give it a try?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Callahan, now slightly off balance, raised his eyebrows and gave a half shrug. "Be my guest." The room was locked in a strange silence. No one moved. No one even breathed too loud. You could hear the hum of the lights above them. Phones were already out. Quietly, subtly. This felt like something that had never happened before, and nobody wanted to miss it. James picked up the marker with the kind of careful ease you only notice when someone's about to do something serious. He didn't posture, didn't stretch his neck or clear his throat. He just stood there for a moment, staring at the equation, eyes narrowing ever so slightly like he was reading a language no one else in the room understood. He tilted his head a fraction, then nodded like he'd seen something, like the problem had whispered its secret to him. And then he started writing. No drama, no flair. Just deliberate, confident lines across the board. One step, then another. He moved like he wasn't solving the problem for the first time, but remembering how he'd solved it before. His penmanship was clean, purposeful. The rhythm of the marker against the board was the only sound in the room. A few students leaned forward. A desk creaked. Callahan folded his arms, his expression unreadable, but his jaw had gone tense. James spoke as he worked, voice calm and level, like a professor in a lecture hall, not a janitor in a high school. See, what you've got here is a classic chain rule problem. Most folks miss it because they're looking at the outside function first. But once you isolate the inner one, it all falls into place. He didn't over-explain. He didn't talk down. He just laid it out like it was obvious. And maybe, once he said it, it was. The more he spoke, the more the room changed. The laughter from earlier had completely vanished, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe, or disbelief, or both. Students were staring now, not with confusion, but with recognition. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't just guessing. This wasn't luck. When he finished, he didn't turn to the class with a grin or wait for applause. He capped the marker, nodded to himself like he'd just finished sweeping a hallway, and stepped back. "That's one way to do it," he said simply. And that was it. The silence that followed didn't feel awkward. It felt sacred, like no one knew what to say because they knew that nothing they said would capture what just happened. A student in the back whispered, "He got it right." Another said, "He did that in his head." And Mr. Callahan, he didn't say a word. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. James turned, walked back to the door, picked up his mop, and pushed it down the hall with the same calm rhythm as before, like nothing had happened. But something had, something big, and no one in that room would ever forget it. For a few moments after James left the room, no one moved. It was as if someone had hit the mute button on the world. The room, just buzzing with sarcasm and laughter moments ago, now sat in an uneasy silence, thick and heavy, like everyone was still processing what had just unfolded. Eyes bounced between the whiteboard and each other. One kid leaned in, squinting at the clean, orderly steps James had left behind. Then came the voice that cracked it all open. "Wait, he did that in his head?" It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The quiet in the room made the words ring louder than a shout. Heads turned. People blinked. Wes Hanley, usually the quietest senior in the front row, was the one who said it. And he wasn't trying to be funny. He looked almost shaken. His eyes stayed locked on the board, like maybe the answer would vanish if he blinked too long. Mr. Callahan, still standing near the front, finally made a sound, more like a grunt than a word. Well, he got the right answer. But his voice was different now. It didn't have the same sharpness, that performative bite everyone was used to. Instead, there was something else buried beneath it. Not sarcasm, not even irritation. It was something closer to confusion, or worse, discomfort. He didn't add anything else. He didn't try to take the moment back. He didn't crack another joke. He just stood there, arms still crossed, eyes locked on the numbers that weren't his anymore. Some students laughed, but not at James. It was more like a release, a way to shake off the tension that had wrapped around them all like a net. Others still didn't know how to feel. They looked toward the door, then back at the board, like maybe James would come back in and explain how or why. But he didn't. He was gone, just as quietly as he came. Yet something had clearly been left behind. Something bigger than math. By the time the bell rang and the hallways filled with the usual noise, the story had already started spreading. Whispers jumped from classroom to classroom like wildfire. Did you see what the janitor did in calc? Dude solved it faster than Callahan could. No calculator. Just brain power. It started as a few excited retellings, but by the end of the next period the video surfaced. A girl named Ruby had filmed the whole thing, quietly from behind her backpack. Shaky, grainy, but clear enough to see James walk to the board, solve the problem, and leave like it was just another part of his day. She uploaded it to TikTok with a caption that said everything in 6 words. Our janitor just cooked our teacher. And then it exploded. By the time students sat down for lunch, it wasn't just a story. It was the story. Phones were being passed around like secret scrolls. Everyone wanted to see the video, to watch it with their own eyes. Teachers heard about it before the lunch bell even rang. In the faculty lounge, the vibe was mixed. Ms. Patel from English was halfway through her sandwich when someone mentioned it. You're saying James, our James, solved a calculus problem. She laughed at first, but then her brow furrowed. Wait, are you serious? Mr. Robinson from Science was nodding. Not just solved it, explained it. Broke it down like he was teaching a class. Across the room, Mr. Callahan sat at the edge of the table, pretending to read through a stack of quizzes. His pen didn't move. His mouth stayed shut. Normally, he'd have something clever to say. Not today. Mrs. Grant, the vice principal, leaned in. Has anyone actually talked to him? Like, talked? People shook their heads. That was the thing about James. He'd been in that building for years. Always early, always dependable. Floors clean, trash emptied, light bulbs changed before anyone even noticed they were out. Everyone respected him, but from a distance. Nobody ever asked where he came from, or what he used to do. He was just James the janitor, the man with the mop. But now students were quoting him, re-watching the way he spoke, repeating the line, once you isolate the inner function, like it was the hook of a song they couldn't get out of their heads. A kid named Theo, who normally hated math, said, I actually understood it when he said it, like for real, not fake nodding in class. And that's when something shifted, not just curiosity, but admiration. Students weren't mocking James, they were in awe. Outside the janitor's closet, 3 students waited quietly after school. No one said anything at first. They weren't there to complain about a spill or to ask for a broom. They just waited. Finally, the door opened. James blinked at them, surprised. A 7th grader held a geometry textbook tight to his chest. Do you tutor? He asked. James didn't answer right away. He looked down at the boy's book, then at the other 2 students. He gave a soft chuckle, not dismissive, just surprised. I haven't in a long time. The kid's voice came out with more hope than pressure. You should. That was really cool. And just like that, it began. The next day, James went back to his usual routine, mop in hand, earbuds in, fixing the broken soap dispenser in the boys' bathroom. But everywhere he went, something was different. Teachers paused their conversations when he walked past. Students nodded or smiled. Real smiles, not the polite kind. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was seen, and not because of a uniform, but because of what he knew, what he showed. By 3rd period, Mr. Callahan's class had a strange energy to it. The usual snark was gone. He didn't call on students randomly. He didn't make offhand jokes. He taught, yes, but his voice was restrained. Eyes fixed on the board, like if he didn't make eye contact, the room might forget what had happened the day before. Wes stayed after class. He walked up slowly, holding his notebook. That thing with James yesterday, he said carefully. That was the same method you showed us last week. Chain rule, right? Callahan nodded once. Correct. Wes looked down, then said it. Only, he explained it better. And with that, he walked out. That sentence stuck. After school, Principal Gonzalez called James into her office. He still wore his green uniform, slightly damp from mopping the cafeteria floors. He took off his cap out of respect when he entered. She smiled and gestured to a chair. "Mind if I ask you something?" she said. James nodded. "Do you have a background in education? Engineering?" There was a pause, just a beat where James looked down at his hands, like brushing dust off an old memory. "I went to Michigan State," he said finally. "Mechanical engineering. Full ride." Gonzalez sat back, surprised. "Seriously?" James nodded again. "Yeah, things got complicated." And for the first time in a long time, he told the story. Not the whole thing, but enough. About how his mother got sick, how he dropped out to work, how he planned to go back but never did. About the jobs that came and went, the life that kept moving without waiting. "I still think about it," he said quietly. "Still got my textbooks at home. Still got the notes." And Gonzalez, who had worked in education for over 2 decades, just listened. It wasn't a dramatic story. No jail time, no scandal, just life, real life. A smart kid from the wrong zip code, trying to hold things together. A young man who once dreamed of building bridges and solving systems, who ended up mopping high school hallways, solving equations in his head between lunch periods. But now, thanks to one sarcastic joke and a chalkboard, he wasn't invisible anymore. Word travels fast in a high school, but nothing travels faster than surprise wrapped in admiration. Within days, James wasn't just the janitor anymore. He had become a quiet phenomenon. Students who used to walk right past him without a second glance were now stopping in the hall to say hello, to ask if he had a minute, to talk about integrals like they were talking about the latest album drop. And he didn't turn them away. He didn't brush them off or act like he was suddenly too important. He just leaned down, asked to see their notes, and started explaining, like he had all the time in the world. It began informally. A sophomore named Brianna waited by the cafeteria exit one day after school, holding a notebook full of scribbles and crossed-out problems. "Mr. James," she said, shy but determined. "I just don't get this. I watched the video like 5 times, but I still don't get it. Can you help?" He took the notebook and studied the problem for a second. "You're close," he said gently, pointing to her second step. "But this right here, that's where it slips." She watched as he rewrote the formula, slowly, explaining each piece with the kind of care that made you feel smart even when you were confused. She didn't just nod, she understood. That moment set something in motion. The next day, 2 more students asked for help. The day after that, 5. By the end of the week, James had a small crowd gathering in the corner of the library after school. No announcements, no flyers, just a handful of desks pushed together and students showing up, uninvited but welcome. They brought their books, their notebooks, their frustrations, and James met them with calm, patience, and a quiet fire that came from somewhere deep. He didn't lecture, he asked questions. Why do you think that's the next step? What are you trying to isolate? What would happen if you flipped that fraction? It wasn't just tutoring, it was teaching. They started calling it Dorsey sessions. At first it was a joke, a nickname whispered between friends, but soon it stuck. You going to the Dorsey session today? Yeah, he's breaking down derivatives again. What surprised everyone wasn't just how clearly he explained things. It was how he made them feel while doing it. Like they mattered. Like their questions weren't dumb. Like they weren't behind, just in progress. And while most teachers were surprised, in the best way, there were those who weren't clapping. Mr. Callahan watched it all unfold from a distance. He never mentioned the tutoring sessions, never acknowledged the shift in the air. But students noticed the change in him. His tone got tighter, his patience thinned. His lectures became more mechanical, like he was reading from a script instead of teaching from passion. And he didn't make jokes anymore, at least not the kind that landed. Some said he was embarrassed, others said he felt threatened. Whatever it was, the fire in his teaching dimmed. Worse, whispers began to spread, this time not from students. A few murmurs from faculty, a couple of side comments in the lounge. And then, like a spark on dry grass, it escalated. Someone filed a formal concern, anonymous, cold. Just a few lines typed up and sent to the school board. Is it appropriate for a janitor to tutor students in an academic setting? Is he certified? Has he been background checked for instruction? It was dressed up in the language of policy, but the intent was clear. Someone wanted James back in his place. Principal Gonzalez wasn't having it. She called the board herself, clarified every detail. James was a district employee. He had passed every required background check. He wasn't teaching classes. He was helping students who asked for help, voluntarily, in his own time. If that was now considered inappropriate, maybe the system needed more fixing than they realized. She never told James about the complaint. She didn't want him to feel like he had to stop doing what clearly mattered. But James wasn't oblivious. He could feel it in the hallway, the slight hesitation in some teachers' greetings, the looks that were a little too long or a little too rehearsed. He felt it in the way some staff members talked about him instead of to him. Not open hostility, just discomfort, like they didn't know what box to put him in anymore. He didn't fit the mold they'd assigned him. He had stepped out of the shadows, and now they didn't know whether to cheer or retreat. But the students made the choice for them. They kept showing up. Every day after school, that little corner in the library filled up. Juniors, sophomores, even freshmen who hadn't even taken calculus yet. They just came because they wanted to understand, because James made them believe they could. Word spread outside the building too. Parents started noticing improvements in grades. One mother emailed the school to thank Mr. Dorsey for helping her son finally pass algebra. Another student who used to skip math class entirely now showed up early just to prep questions for the next Dorsey session. And through it all, James never changed. He didn't ask for recognition. He didn't hang a sign or post about his sessions. He still swept the halls, still scrubbed the cafeteria tables, still fixed the leaky faucet in the staff bathroom. He didn't want special treatment. He just wanted to help. But not everyone saw it that way. Mr. Callahan's bitterness didn't fade. It deepened. He started making comments again, subtle digs during class. Well, maybe you should ask your new favorite tutor how to solve this one. He never said James's name, but everyone knew. Students started tuning him out. A few even pushed back. We will ask him. He actually explains it better. Callahan stopped cold. He didn't argue. He just changed the subject. But the damage had been done. Not by James, but by Callahan's refusal to grow. That tension grew quietly under the surface. Two men on opposite sides of a hallway, one trying to hold his ground, the other just trying to be of use. But eventually, something would have to give. The school had changed. The students had changed. And whether everyone liked it or not, James Dorsey wasn't just the janitor anymore. He was a teacher in every way that mattered. It happened on a Tuesday, quiet and unremarkable on the surface. Students filtered into the library, as they had been doing every week since that now legendary moment in Mr. Callahan's class. The usual group had already staked out their corner, 4 desks pushed together, notebooks and graph paper spread out, water bottles clinking, pencils tapping in anticipation. James arrived just before them, wearing his usual uniform, sleeves rolled up, a binder tucked under one arm. He greeted each student with a quiet nod or a soft, "Ready for today?" It had become routine, but one that felt anything but ordinary to the kids who showed up. He had a different way of teaching, gentle, never rushed, always checking in. "Does that make sense?" he'd ask. "Or should we look at it another way?" He never made them feel small for getting it wrong. He didn't expect them to already know. He expected them to try, and that made them want to. That made them care. But that day, as he was walking through the third example, something dense and curly that most kids would have given up on a month ago, someone unexpected walked into the library. Mr. Callahan. He didn't make a sound. He just stood near the back of the room, arms crossed, watching. The students noticed him almost immediately. You could feel the ripple move across the group. Eyes darting, eyebrows raising, whispers hovering just above audible. But James didn't flinch. He saw Callahan, offered the smallest nod of recognition, then went back to the board. "All right," he said calmly. "So now we apply the product rule. Watch how the derivative shifts when we break it out into two parts." A student leaned in closer. Another scribbled notes faster. 10 minutes passed before Callahan moved. He stepped forward slowly, stopping just beside the table. The room was still. Even the sound of pages turning stopped. Everyone expected tension. Maybe a cutting comment, maybe a challenge. But what came instead caught everyone off guard. "You mind if I sit in?" Callahan asked. James paused, his face unreadable. He looked at Callahan for a beat, long enough for everyone to notice. Then he gestured toward the empty chair. "Long as you don't mind learning something," he said, matter-of-factly. A few kids laughed, not mockingly but with a sort of relief. The tension broke a little, and Callahan gave a half smile, the kind that didn't quite reach the eyes but wasn't fake either. He sat down quietly. That session felt different, not louder, not bigger, just heavier with meaning. For 30 minutes, James guided the students through advanced problems, never talking down, always inviting them into the process. Callahan said little. He just watched, listened, and took it all in. No one said it, but everyone felt it. This was more than a tutoring session now. This was healing. This was growth. After the session ended and the students packed up their things, Callahan lingered behind. James was erasing the board when he finally spoke. "You know," he began slowly, "I used to think teaching was about control, about making sure the room listened because I had something to say. But watching you today, it reminded me it's about something else." James didn't say anything, but he stopped erasing. Callahan continued. "It's about showing up, making it count, not needing the spotlight, just helping someone get to the answer on their own." James nodded once, then softly replied, "We all lose our way sometimes." And for the first time, Callahan didn't look like a man trying to defend himself. He looked like someone realizing how much he still had to learn. A few days later, Principal Gonzalez called James back into her office. Her tone was warm, but there was an excitement behind her words that hadn't been there before. "We've been talking," she said. "Me, the board, a few of the district folks. There's a proposal we'd like to run by you." James sat across from her, quiet as ever. "We want to offer you a chance to turn the tutoring sessions into an actual elective. No grades, no credits, just an enrichment class. Something students can take if they want more support, more clarity, more of what you're already giving them." She paused. Of course, there would be hoops to jump through. Policies, approvals, paperwork. But if you're willing... James looked down at his hands rough from years of cleaning floors, lifting buckets, changing filters and scrubbing gum off lockers. Hands that used to hold tools, textbooks, dreams. "I appreciate it," he said softly. "But I don't need the title. Let the kids keep showing up because they want to, not because it's on a schedule." And Gonzalez respected that. She didn't push. "Then we'll support you however we can," As the weeks rolled on, James kept showing up. The sessions grew. Word spread even beyond the district. A local reporter caught wind of the story and stopped by to talk. James didn't make it about himself. No long speeches, no dramatic headlines, just a quiet sentence that summed up everything. "I'm not giving them anything they don't already have," he said. "Just showing them what's already inside." That spring, the school hosted its annual student showcase. Usually it was about art, science, music. This year, something new appeared. A booth in the corner of the gym, tucked between the robotics display and the drama club's props table. A handwritten sign above it read, "Dorsey's Table." Pinned to the boards were student reflections, letters, notes, stories. Each one told a different version of the same truth. How one man changed how they saw themselves, not with answers, but with belief. Isaiah, who once failed every quiz, now confidently led a group project on systems of equations. Tasha, who used to flinch at the sight of word problems, now tutored her younger cousins, using the same metaphors James taught her. One student simply wrote, "He never made me feel stupid. He made me feel seen." That night, as the gym emptied and parents took pictures under streamers and banners, James stood near the booth, nodding at each student who came by. No speech, no spotlight, just a quiet presence, the kind that makes more of an impact than noise ever could. Back at his apartment, long after the applause had faded and the lights were out, James pulled an old box from under his bed. Inside, the Michigan State sweatshirt was still folded neatly, yellowed at the edges. Next to it, he placed a new folder, one filled with thank you notes from students. Some written in pencil, some typed and printed, one even drawn in crayon. He didn't need to read them all. He'd felt their words every day for weeks. Legacy, he realized, wasn't about titles. It wasn't about certificates or roles or recognition. It was about the impact you leave behind in others, about what people carry because of you, even when you're not there. James never finished his degree. He never got a classroom with his name on the door. But every Tuesday and Thursday after the final bell, that little corner of the library transformed into something more powerful than any diploma. It became a place where students believed in themselves, where they asked hard questions and found even harder answers, where the janitor taught more than just math. He taught them they were capable. He taught them they were worth the effort. And maybe most importantly, he taught them not to wait for someone else to give them permission to be brilliant.